afternoon. My name is Romela Markarian. I'm the Vice Chair, filling in for Mr. Olivares, our Chair. And welcome to our December 16th CDBG Advisory Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Committee members: Armenian,
Present.
Markarian,
Present.
Ramirez,
Here.
Bastian,
Present.
and Chair Olivares is absent. The agenda for the December 16, 2013 meeting of the CDBG Advisory Committee was posted on or before Wednesday, December 11, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Item 2, minutes. At A, approval of the minutes of the October 30th, 2013 and November 18, 2013 CDBG Advisory Committee meetings.
Do we need to approve this? We haven't.
Yes, please, we would need a motion. You might want to do them separately because, as a reminder, Committee Member Tashin was not present at the October 30th meeting, and you were not present at the November 18th meeting, Vice Chair.
Okay, so I would like to move to approve the minutes for for October 30th.
Can I just
I think because you
comment?
I'm sorry, if I may, I think because you are presiding over the meeting, you would not, you would have to ask somebody
Okay.
else to make the motion.
And I can't make the motion because
Because you
I
were-
was not present
That's
on that day,
correct.
so I'm going to abstain.
Well, I can make the motion. I just wanted to make a comment on the correction. Instead of revision, could we change that to correction? I have a problem when we revise minutes. So if the minutes, it's pretty clear what it was, though.
Correction.
Certainly.
So I move that we approve the minutes with the correction.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. I'll take roll call. Committee members: Armenian,
Yes.
Markarian,
Yes.
Ramirez,
Yes.
Bastian,
Abstain.
Olivares is absent.
Okay, for November 18th. Can someone move it? That was for the 30th. We need to move for the second.
So if no one has any corrections to it, I move to approve the minutes from October
November.
November 18th, sorry.
Okay.
I'll join in that November 18th approval of the yes, I will join in that.
Committee members: Armenian,
Yes.
Markarian,
I abstain.
Ramirez,
Yes.
Bastian,
Yes.
Olivares is absent. Okay. Item 3, oral communications. I don't have any cards.
Okay.
Item 4, business agenda. A, action items. 1, review and approve report on the reprogramming of $15,000 in fiscal year 2013-14 CDBG social service funds to 3 existing fiscal year 2013-14 social service projects. At A is a motion to approve the reprogramming of fiscal year 2013-14 CDBG funds in the amount of $15,000 from the Camp Rosie program and the Multicultural Program and ESL Classes project to the Door of Hope, Armenian Relief Society, and Glendale Youth Alliance projects in an amount of $5,000 each.
Thank you, Iris. Do we have a report?
Yes. Madam Chair, committee members, we actually have a motion here, a proposed recommendation and motion to request the advisory committee to approve the reprogramming of current year fiscal year 2013-14 CDBG funds in the amount of $15,000 from Camp Rosie and the Multicultural Program ESL classes sponsored by the GAR, Glendale Association for Retarded, GAR, and propose to reallocate these to Door of Hope, Armenian Relief Society, and Glendale Youth Alliance projects in the amount of $5,000 each. These funds, again, were derived from these canceled projects. At the last meeting, the committee did decide to request staff to issue out an RFP to the agencies that are currently funded out of CDBG and request applications and budgets and proposals from these agencies to utilize this existing funding. The staff did release an abbreviated RFP out in November, and 3 proposals were received from 3 different agencies that I mentioned before. again, is from Community Relief Society, Armenian Relief Society for the Community Outreach Program for $5,000, the Glendale Youth Alliance Youth Employment Program for $5,000, Door Hope Children and Youth Program for $5,000. Again, these are existing agencies funded out of CDBG. They met the criteria for the safety net, being able to expend funds in a timely manner, and of course meeting their goals and objectives this year. So staff is proposing to recommend to the advisory committee to approve the reprogramming of these funds to these three nonprofit agencies to facilitate the expenditure of these funds, which again cannot be carried over or utilized next year. They must be spent this year by June 30th. So we certainly know these agencies will expend the funds, and it will meet the needs of the RFP and the committee's desires to fund safety net programs.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Any comments from?
Did you receive any other proposals besides those three?
Committee members, we did receive inquiries from other agencies. Unfortunately, we did not receive other proposals. They were not, they didn't necessarily fit the criteria and did not want to spend the time on that.
What are our options today with respect to the 15,000? I understand that three agencies have submitted the funding request of 5,000 each. Are we specifically, do we have to go by the recommendations of distributing 5,000 each to each of the agencies, or could we say, okay, we believe that 10,000 should go to this agency as opposed to, split it up evenly?
Vice Chair Markarian, members of the Commission, it is at your discretion to approve whatever variation of the $15,000 that is available. You can choose to give it all to one of the agencies that submitted a proposal, or 7,500 to two, or 10,000 to one. It's at your discretion. Per the committee's direction at the last meeting, though, in the RFP, we did indicate that the maximum amount that an agency could apply for was $5,000. Obviously, that's why each proposal is for $5,000, because that's the cap that we prescribed. But it's at your discretion.
So if they applied for 5, how can we grant them 10?
Because we have that discretion.
Right, but if they're only asking for 5, we can still go above their request? That
yes, the assumption being that even with an additional $5,000, it would not be equal to the original amount they applied for last February.
okay.
So there would still be a need gap, if you will.
So they've already demonstrated a need for a larger amount. They received less of an amount, so therefore there's that gap that gives us reason to believe that they could use additional funds effectively.
Correct.
However, we did, I remember in the meeting where we talked about this, we did, the 5,000, the three 5,000s came out of our discussion.
Yes.
So if we were to reallocate, I feel like we should have a discussion about that and kind of what the rationale is for that, because I think that's what kind of guided why we got $5,000 applications.
I think it was
Proposals.
because we didn't want applicants thinking they would get the 15,000.
Now, at that time, did we know who was going to be applying for these additional funding? And since I missed that meeting, I apologize for that. Was there any discussion as to how this 15,000 was going to be distributed in terms of funding?
Well, my recollection was originally I think staff had an approach that they were recommending at that meeting. After further discussion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, upon further discussion, we felt that it was important to have a level playing field and have at least all the current grantees have an opportunity to make their case as to why they could use some of those additional funds. And then we ultimately ended up discussing, for example, because I remember I brought it up, that we could, for example, split it up 3 ways and give more than one organization the potential benefits for some additional funding, as long as they could rationalize how they would use that additional funding.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't say we could go more with less, recipients. That's certainly, I think, open for discussion. I was just bringing up the fact that we kind of guided it that way originally, and I think that's why what we got back is guided it, which was, in the form of $5,000.
Yeah.
And we narrowed it down to health and safety.
I think all 3 organizations were picked unanimously by the committee members here. And based on the population they serve and the need in the community, I think those 3 organizations were picked. And after reviewing what they're going to be using this $5,000 for, I feel comfortable just moving forward with what was discussed. Since we don't have any other applicant, unless some other new documentations were submitted that we want to change our mind and change the allocation level.
I guess I would be interested if, Mr. Tashian, if you have you brought forth the question originally, if you had something in your mind that you wanted to discuss, an idea that you wanted to discuss that we may not have considered since you weren't here.
Mine was more of an inquiry as to whether or not the previous meeting, the committee had indicated that there's 15,000, and therefore we're going to split that up into 3 ways at 5,000 each. And my understanding from your comments is that that was at least tentatively agreed upon. So it was more of an inquiry as opposed to other suggestions or recommendations.
Yeah, I don't think it was a hard rule that we set down. We were just trying to be fair to give an opportunity to all our current grantees to, like I said, make a case without it getting overly competitive in terms of making a case for 15, because obviously every one of them could probably use the full 15, and I think they were quite humble in their proposals back, trying to be fair with each other, because they're trying to be fair because they recognize that there's multiple needs here. So I'd be open to discussion about it if, like I said, if there's a compelling reason as to why we would weight it differently. But otherwise, I would support Member Markarian's approach to move forward with it. I'm comfortable. I read through all the proposals. I'm comfortable with the organizations, and I have no doubt that 5,000 is still a drop in the bucket compared to what the needs are.
And I too agree with you. I've read through the abbreviated funding application of all 3 applicants, and I don't have any problems with any of them, and all 3 are well known to all of us.
I think that the most effective use of funds is to give the 15,000 to one organization. That was my original motion. And I believe that is, but however, when the proposals went out at 5,000, giving more money to any other group, now it would seem unfair. So I will support the motion.
Okay.
Make it.
We make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the the funding proposals, the 3 funding proposals and recommendations of staff in the form of 3 $5,000 grants to each of the proposals that were submitted.
And I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Committee members Armenian,
Yes.
Markarian,
Yes.
Ramirez,
Yes.
Bastian.
Yes.
Chair Luares is absent.
Great.
The next item is item 5, committee staff comments.
Comments, anyone? This is our last meeting for December,
Well,
for the year.
I guess I'll just ask a question. Is there any updates to our process coming up quickly upon us for our next year's grant application process and proposals? Anything changed?
Vice Chair, Mark Carey, members of the committee, there's no change actually in our process, our dates, our deadlines. It's as stand. What we're hoping for, and we hope to know maybe by time RFPs, the time your meeting is a better budget from federal government. As you know, the Senate and House Budget Committee made some strides towards having a balanced budget, which would possibly eliminate sequester, which is an automatic federal 5% cut, which we had anticipated in our funding plan. So that may be good news that we may revise the funds available when the time comes that we meet. But again, I don't want to say anything yet. We're not changing anything in our application, but it's a sign of good news that possibly maybe some federal funding would not be cut at this time.
The second question I had is, I know at the last council session, or maybe one of the previous ones when you were present, there was some discussion, I believe, on the dais about the $361,000 that the city allocates to code enforcement. Any movement on whether or not the city has the ability to forego that amount and redistribute it amongst the nonprofits?
Vice Chair Mark Carey and members of the committee, the Community Development Department does not have the ability to absorb those funds as part of the city general revenue budget. So it needs those funds in order to focus code enforcement in Southern Glendale. And as I explained in the meeting, Southern Glendale is our target area, and without the CDBG funds to be able to use them in Southern Glendale, we would have a very passive code enforcement program, which would be based on it would be complaint driven. We'd have to receive a phone call in order to have the staff resources to go out and make inspections. And we do have a commitment under the HUD guidelines to target quality affordable housing for low-income residents. And the code enforcement program is a very, very effective tool to allow us to do that. So it would be a real hardship, and that's what we try to explain to the City Council. There was one council member that raised that as an issue. If I remember correctly, I think the other council members seemed okay with the funding recommendation.
Was there any discussion about revisiting that approach in future years?
It effectively is revisited every year that we go with the proposed allocation plan and the predesignation of funds, and that's a very important discussion. And each year there seems to be a slightly different take on the predesignation of the funds. Sometimes, for example, last year the council voted 3-2 in approval. 3-2 to approve the predesignation of funds, which means that 2 council members did not feel that we should predesignating funds. So every year it comes up. And every year they have a new discussion, and every year they make a determination as to whether they want to continue to predesignate funds and for which projects. So as of now, they approved the funding plan that we presented, which was the 3 predesignated projects, including code enforcement, including an allocation for a park project, to complete the Palmer Park project, and then our Section 108 loan payment to HUD. Those are the only predesignated projects. The other thing I want to point out, the code enforcement funds we would not be able to use them for social services. They'd have to go back to another capital improvement program, which means, and the reason why it would be attractive to be able to not to have to use the CDBG funds for code enforcement is it would be that much more money that a community organization could use for a bigger, more significant rehab project of their own.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I raised the issue. Obviously, I'm new to this year, but by general principles, agreeing with in general with Committee Member Ramirez's remarks, which is, the more these organizations get squeezed, the more which is the reason why we have this 15,000 that we reallocated. You know, organizations start walking away with it, walking away from the grants because it's no longer an effective way of garnering funding for what are really important programs, because you can make an argument that just as important as code enforcement, if these organizations weren't stepping up to the plate, the city would have a tremendous social burden on their hands to deal with. So I really believe in this partnership with these nonprofits, because they give you a lot of bang for the dollar, and a lot of mileage and a lot of benefit back to the community. So I want to really be an advocate for, as much as possible, that if the city can do its budgeting, which it has vast amounts more cost, obviously, but vast amounts more resources compared to these nonprofit organizations, I really feel like it would be prudent for the city to find a way to at least transition off of CDBG funds so that we could really make some progress in the community. That's just my general
Thank you. I agree.
philosophical approach.
I had a question, too, following up on your question. I followed that meeting, too, and I wasn't clear that this money, this code enforcement budget, was used for the whole city, not just Southern Glendale.
Vice Chair Mark Carrion, committee members, the CDBG funds that we use can only be used in Southern Glendale. So there's an additional budget that the Community Development Department does use for citywide code enforcement. So let's say, for example, their code enforcement program is $700,000. Of that, $390,000 is to pay for staff doing code enforcement in Southern Glendale, and then the balance of their budget is for staff that's doing code enforcement in non-Southern Glendale. So CDBG leverages a larger code enforcement program.
Because at that community meeting, one of the concerns that was raised was that they only had one inspector, and that's why, you know, he spoke and said his time was limited, resources were limited, and that's a lot of money for one inspector. That was my understanding at that meeting.
Committee Member Ramirez, yeah, I was at that meeting too. There's actually one inspector that's paid out of CDBG, and also another field inspector. I believe there's two. He's probably meaning that in that one particular area, that might be one person, but there are several staff members in that Southern Glendale. However, as you know, in the past, there have been some bigger cuts to code enforcement in the past, which again, the community's sense is to continue, and the priority for them is to continue using CDBG funds for code enforcement, is what I understood from the community meetings that we've been involved, because there has been such cuts from the overall city budget on code enforcement as a result of some other funds that were used from housing. So the fact remains that there's continued need for CDBG code enforcement based on those comments from the committee members at that meeting. But there is other code enforcement inspectors in that area. In South Glendale, it might have been just one in that particular neighborhood.
So the CDBG funds for code enforcement are over and above what the city's funding for the whole city is. So it adds.
Yes. Yes.
But it seems to me we should have more than 2 inspectors.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Mark Carrion, committee members, in addition to inspectors, it also pays for a support staff person and some maintenance and operational expenses. So it's total, it's probably 3 or 3.5 staff to focus on Southern Glendale with the CDBG funds.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. All right, if any other comments?
I just have one quick question, Vice Chair. Has the program planning schedule been updated or changed since our previous meetings, other than the full day and half day CDBG meetings that we have? Has that been updated or changed since the previous meetings?
No, the last change that we made to it was the date of the February meetings from the 14th to the, I want to say the 21st, changing the second meeting to the 24th. That was the last change, but I'd be happy to send you a revised version.
Yeah, if you can do that, I would
Latest version.
I would
That'd be
appreciate
great
that.
if you just get an
That's
update.
just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Thank you. And by that, I would like to, yes.
If I
Mr.
may,
Carrillo.
Vice Chair
Sure.
Karian, I just want to make one quick announcement for an event we're having today at one of our community centers in the city, and that's the Glendale Community Safety Event, which we'll put up a flyer up on the screen. And it's an opportunity for the families here in Glendale to learn about safety concerning underage drinking, the legal consequences of drinking and driving and walking and biking safely in Glendale. I believe committee members past expressed certainly their concerns about recent traffic incidents in Glendale, particularly in the South Glendale area that have occurred. And this is one attempt by the Glendale Police Department, our department, Parks, Community Services and Parks, and Walk by Glendale, a nonprofit bicycling and walking advocacy group here in Glendale, to promote an event, provide an event for the community. So certainly I'd like to invite the community members and the committee to attend. It will be on Pacific Community Center from 5 to 6:30 p.m. today.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Great timing with the holidays approaching.
Vice Chair, before we adjourn, I'd like to wish our audience and everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a healthy and safe holiday season.
Thank you. And again, we also would like to thank the staff for their hard work and dedication, their guidance and their support throughout the year. And we thank all the organizations that really give back to the community. They partner with us, and they really, truly make a difference in our community. So thank you. And all my fellow new members, again, welcome. Looking forward to a great year in 2014. And by that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays, everyone. Have a great day. The meeting is adjourned.